and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Joining us, whether you're listening on DAB radio, watching on the fantastic GB News app, or if you found us on your TV, stay right here and tell all your mates, because tonight I am joined by three superb panellists. At the moment, it's only two of them, but we hope there'll be three in a moment, to fearlessly tackle the most interesting stories of the day. A little later, cycling superstar Bradley Wiggins has revealed that he was sexually groomed by a coach as a young teen. So I'm going to be asking, are those days gone? Aren't kids today much more able to safely make complaints about adults? And the pandemic hangover continues. 9 out of 10 people in one survey say they want to work from home. We're running a Twitter poll on @GBNews, so please vote. Do you think the long-term effects of remote working are going to have a positive or a negative effect on humanity? But hot off the press, Boris Johnson's public response to the fixed penalty notice he received for partying in lockdown. What did he say? What do you think? And what do our panel make of it? We will see you straight after the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Bev, thank you. The top stories: the Conservative MP and former Chief Whip, Mark Harper, has published a letter saying he's lost confidence in the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and that he's no longer worthy of being Prime Minister. That comes after Boris Johnson apologised to MPs in the Commons just now for breaking COVID laws during lockdown in June 2020. Addressing the Commons for the first time since he was fined, the Prime Minister said he did not realise at the time or afterwards that the event he attended could amount to a breach of the rules.
It did not occur to me then or subsequently that a gathering in the Cabinet room just before a vital meeting on COVID strategy could amount to a breach of the rules. I repeat, that was my mistake, and I apologise for it unreservedly.
Johnson speaking within the last hour. Well, MPs will decide on Thursday whether or not the Prime Minister should face a parliamentary investigation into claims he misled Parliament. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is calling for the Prime Minister's resignation.
What a joke. Even now, as the latest mealy-mouthed apology stumbles out of one side of his mouth, a new set of deflections and distortions pour from the other. But the damage is already done. It's what he does. It's who he is. He knows he's dishonest and incapable of changing.
Sir Keir Starmer. Well, also in the Commons this afternoon, the Home Secretary defended plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Priti Patel says access to the UK should be based on need and not on the ability to pay people smugglers. She also told MPs the new bill complies with domestic and international legal obligations.
This type of illegal migration puts unsustainable pressures on our public services and local communities. Every day, the broken asylum system costs the taxpayer almost £5 million in hotel accommodation alone. And as the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, said last week, we cannot sustain a parallel illegal system. Our compassion may be infinite, but our capacity to help people is not.
Priti Patel. Well, the former Prime Minister, Theresa May, criticised the idea, saying she doesn't believe the government's plan is viable.
And from what I have heard and seen so far of this policy, I do not support the removal to Rwanda policy on the grounds of legality, practicality and efficacy.
Theresa May. Well, the Prime Minister has been speaking to the US President, Joe Biden, and other world leaders about the ongoing situation in Ukraine. And they're talking about tougher sanctions against Moscow. The Prime Minister's already warned his cabinet that Ukraine is in a perilous position, despite recent setbacks to Russian forces. And he believes the war is entering an attritional phase, which could last several months. The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, has called for a 4-day humanitarian pause to allow for the safe passage of civilians.
Humanitarian needs are dire. People do not have food, water, supplies to treat the sick or wounded, or simply to live day to day. More than 12 million people need humanitarian assistance in Ukraine today. And of those, more than 1/3 are in Mariupol, Kherson, Donetsk and Luhansk.
Here, a man has appeared in court after 2 police officers were threatened with a knife in London yesterday. The 29-year-old has been charged with attempted grievous bodily harm and possession of a blade following the incident at Horse Guards Parade. He's been remanded in custody and will appear at Southwark Crown Court next month. Energy bosses say the government must intervene to prevent what they believe will be a horrific winter for many. The chief executive of Scottish Power told a committee hearing this morning his company received 8,000 calls to its helpline last week from families struggling to pay their bills. Keith Anderson is calling for a government deficit fund to reduce the bills of those in fuel poverty by up to £1,000 from October.
Come October, that's going to get horrific, truly horrific. And it's got to a stage now where I honestly believe the size and scale of this is beyond what I can deal with. It's beyond what I think this industry can deal with. And I think it needs a massive shift, significant shift in the government policy.
Keith Anderson, more on that in our next bulletin. On TV, online and on your radios via DAB+. You're with GB News, and now it's time for Bev Turner.
Hello, you're watching Dewbs Co with me, Bev Turner, standing in for Michelle Dewberry today. Welcome if you're watching on TV or listening on the radio. Tonight I am joined by almost 3 superb panellists. We've got 2 at the moment. She's on her way, but we'll be fine. To fearlessly tackle the most interesting stories of the day, my panel until 7 are former Brexit MEP and political commentator Michael Heaver, political consultant Emma Burnell, who is not yet here. She's making her way into the studio as we speak, and co-founder of the Together Declaration and a regular face on GB News, Alan Miller. Thank you, guys, for joining us this evening. We're going to be discussing later cycling superstar Bradley Wiggins. He's revealed that he was sexually groomed by a coach as a young teen. So we're wondering if those days are gone. Aren't kids much more able to make complaints safely to adults these days, you would hope? And we're going to be talking about the hangover of lockdowns. I know that, Alan, you will have a lot to say about that. 9 out of 10 of you, apparently, you lazy things, don't want to go back to work. You want to work from home. So we're going to be talking about the effect of that. Is that going to be a positive or a negative on humanity? I personally think it's going to be rather a negative. But anyway, we want to hear what you have to say as well. Of course, as always, GB Views at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Beverly Turner or at GB News. I also want to remind you that you can subscribe to our YouTube page. You can see the live bits, you can see all live or the best bits from the channel when you search GB News. We're running a poll tonight on Twitter about that survey, about 9 out of 10 people wanting to work from home. I want to know what you think. Will the effects of that be mainly positive or negative? First up, though, less than an hour ago, in fact, less than probably half an hour ago, he was a bit late, Boris Johnson had his first chance to address the House of Commons since receiving his fixed penalty notice for attending parties in 10 Downing Street during lockdown. So let's go over to Darren McCaffrey. He joins us live from College Green outside the House of Commons. Good evening, Darren. Thank you very much for getting down there and for reporting for us tonight. The Prime Minister's apology was short and sweet, wasn't it? It had his head hung down. Do you think it was genuine?
Well, I mean, it's not for me to decide whether it's genuine or not. It's up to viewers and, indeed, more importantly, to a large degree, at least in the short term, to Conservative MPs about whether he was contrite enough. It was an apology he repeated time and time again, almost to every question that he faced from MPs, whether it was from his own side or indeed from the Labour opposition. Clearly, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, did touch upon some personal examples of people who had suffered essentially during this kind of incident that had taken place, people who had not been able to see their loved ones in hospital. Interestingly, though, it was primarily the intervention of one MP, Mark Harper, he's a former Conservative Chief Whip, that was the most notable kind of thing that came from that statement in the Commons today, Bev. He said that he regretted that the Prime Minister had broke the laws, that he's asking us to defend the indefensible, and that he no longer thinks he is worthy of the great office he holds. Another Conservative MP essentially calling for the Prime Minister to go. He submitted his letter to the 1922 committee. So it was a pretty rough ride for the PM, but let's have a listen in to what the Prime Minister had to say.
Offered the British people a full apology, and I take this opportunity on the first available sitting day to repeat my wholehearted apology to the House. I acknowledge the hurt and the anger, and I said that people had a right to expect better of their Prime Minister. That was my mistake, and I apologise for it unreservedly.
And Darren, Keir Starmer didn't hold back, did he?
No, he really didn't in many regards. The Labour leader made quite an eloquent speech that I think will have hit home with some Conservative MPs, touching, as I say, on the personal sacrifices that many have made over the last 2 years. It has been quite difficult, and the Prime Minister essentially had to accept that this wasn't, and he did make this point actually, that it wasn't akin to a parking fine or to a speeding ticket, as some Cabinet Ministers had suggested. Here is the Labour leader responding to what the Prime Minister had to say.
What a joke. Even now, as the latest mealy-mouthed apology stumbles out of one side of his mouth, a new set of deflections and distortions pour from the other. But the damage is already done. It's what he does. It's who he is. He knows he's dishonest and incapable of changing.
The opposition parties weren't happy with the apology at all, were they, Darren?
No, they weren't indeed, but as I say, ultimately it is fundamentally down to Conservative MPs about what does happen next. There's going to be a vote on Thursday, Bev, in which the Labour Party are going to try and get this, essentially, to get the Prime Minister referred to the Privileges Committee to investigate whether he lied to Parliament, if you like, whether he deliberately misled MPs when he suggested that there were no parties and that no rules were broken and the guidance was followed. I think it's my hunch that in the end, I think that's unlikely to happen because I think most Conservative MPs, as we saw today, will fall in line behind the Prime Minister. We heard from a whole plethora of them reiterating the support for Boris Johnson and suggesting now is not the time for all of this, given the situation in Ukraine. That is not to say, though, that the Prime Minister fundamentally is out of the woods on all of this, and I say that for two reasons. First of all, we've got local elections coming up in just a couple of weeks' time. It is possible the Conservative Party may not do very well there, and one of the reasons the Conservative Party like Boris Johnson is because he wins elections. If that is no longer the case, many will maybe question that support. And second of all, is that this may not be the last time we see the Prime Minister apologise for having received a PICS felony fine. There are suggestions this could happen again and again, and maybe even again, that he may receive 4 fines in total. I think if that is the case, again, that will start to strain on Conservative MPs. The public mood may well switch, and we may find ourselves back where we were at the end of January and February, when things were very, very difficult, squeaky bum time, if you like, for Boris Johnson.
Thank you very much, GB News' political editor there, Darren McCaffrey. So, a lot to take in there. Michael Heaver, let me come to you first. I don't know about you, but my feeling when we're discussing this and we're talking about it almost seems ridiculous that we are still discussing whether or not he attended parties, whether there was cake, whether... He's obviously been found guilty of breaking the lockdown rules, but were the rules necessary in the first place is the first question. And if they were necessary, then what he has done is deemed to be very bad. Of course, it is perhaps a resignable offence. Is it or not? I'm not sure.
Well, look, I certainly think in terms of Partygate at the moment, I've been speaking to friends over the weekend, I do think opposition parties run the risk of overplaying their hand. Now, this is going to rumble on. For instance, one of the most damaging things that could still come out are photos of this. Now, imagine that splashed all over the Sunday papers, for instance. What I would say, though, in the short term, as Darren noted there, with a few exceptions, Conservative MPs are backing Boris into the May elections, and we'll see how the Conservatives perform there. But I would take this view, that on other issues is perhaps where the Conservatives should be really worried at the moment. For instance, on net zero, you see the Reform Party now in the latest YouGov poll, 10% of Leavers currently intending to vote for Reform UK. Of course, we've got the prospect of surging illegal migration across from France still. That's going on at a much higher rate than we saw last year. And just before we came on, I also just saw a YouGov poll that actually had the Labour Party now level with the Conservatives on the economy. Those outside of Partygate, outside of the bubble, those are the sort of issues that if I was a Conservative MP would be seriously troubling me.
Alan, do you share my frustration in a sense? And a little bit what Michael was saying, that there are issues which feel more pressing, I think, to the British public right now, and whether he did the right thing or not. But I don't think this is what he should be apologising for. There are lots of other things he should be apologising for.
Well, I think that's the case. To be honest, I think there should be an apology and a commitment that we should never have lockdowns again. Many of the restrictions were about theatre. We know that there was a campaign of fear with the behavioural psychology unit, the imposition of nudge, an inability to have transparency. Parliament was suspended. We jettisoned the pandemic strategy. We were constantly had this repetitive narrative that you mustn't do this, that you'd get fines, anything from £100 to £10,000. I remember being a police officer a police officer embarrassingly asking me to get up off the park on my own when he should have been able to do much more important things. We know the country now knows, and we're beginning to see a lot of the things that have come out, that actually many of these measures were not required. If you look at what happened with Sweden, there were alternative measures, there were different approaches that we could have taken, and yet what happened was that we had these lockdowns and restrictions. Then the Prime Minister doubled down and he said, well, he wouldn't rule them out again, and perhaps there might be a variant that affects children. Again, disingenuous, because we know that still, the elderly and the vulnerable and those with comorbidities are the ones most at risk. And I really think it's very problematic. I think if he is going to apologise and if he were to resign, it should be around the fact that lockdowns were imposed, that we were told 15 million jabs to freedom, but now we're being told that 5 to 11-year-olds need to have a vaccine, I'm not sure why, about a range of measures that have been damaging for the economy. And let's be honest, the cost of living crisis, whether to heat or eat, came way before Ukraine. That's exacerbating things, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a frustration, isn't it? Emma, well done. You've hot-footed it here. Emma Bennell.
And I would like to unreservedly apologise for being late.
Well, was it your fault, and did you know what time you were meant to be here, Emma? This is the question, isn't it?
I absolutely knew what time I was meant to be here, and whether or not it was my fault, I did not take sufficient measures to make sure that I delivered as I was supposed to.
We forgive you. You're here now, and that's what matters. But, you know, Boris Johnson said today, I don't know whether you got to see him live, you might have been underground on the tube, that he said it didn't occur to me then or subsequently that it was a breach of the rules. Now, actually, I believe him, because I don't think he's the kind of man that would have known the detail of the rules at that time. We did. We were having ludicrous situations where we were having Zoom calls with grandparents meeting their new baby, grandchildren for the first time. We were having, like, awful disputes within families about who could or couldn't go to funerals or weddings, and the ludicrousness when you look back at some of the things that we were forced to do. Did he genuinely, do you think, not really? I think he probably didn't understand how we were all living our lives.
I think if I didn't know that it was illegal to kill people and then murdered someone, I wouldn't get away with it. He set the rules. He is ultimately responsible.
But do you not remember how much they changed?
They
I mean,
did
listen,
change
I don't want to
but do you not remember who was in charge of changing them? Ultimately, the buck stops with him. And, you know, there are a lot of things I would suggest Boris Johnson should resign over. My list might be different from Michael and Alan's, but I've got one. But the point is, you cannot be a lawmaker who doesn't understand the laws, never mind a lawmaker who breaks them. It's just as simple as that. You can't, because now we could argue until the cows come home about what future things might happen that would necessitate some big change in the law. But why should I, if they pass a law that, say, Alan and Michael think are fabulous and I think is terrible, why should I do it? Who's going to tell me that there's any sort of responsibility for me to do it?
Well, I was just going to say that one of the problems, I think, is that there were so many different rules, and a lot of it was just presenting this show, because actually I do think even, you know, because it's civil servants and other people that make rules and then he goes out and says it at the lectern, but actually it shows how problematic many of these rules and restrictions were. If we look at all the exceptions, you know, you look at the Euros, if you look at COP26, if you look at G8, why is it the business people were able to travel and not other people? You see, what I really hope is that the public looks at this and takes a step back and thinks, yes, we made a huge commitment, we really, really sacrificed, but actually, what were all these measures about in the first place? And let's have an honest, robust discussion about it. Not this particular part, that can be part of it, but the much bigger question, because actually it should never be part of the policy repertoire again.
I absolutely, and I remember at the time thinking, will we one day look back at the ludicrousness? Will we look back at this and think, oh, what we were made to do, it was like satire? And I think we are getting there now. And for me, what I like about this story is the fact that it is pulling into focus for the majority of people to say, no, we're not doing it again. You won't be able to do that to us again, because if you didn't adhere to the rules that time, we aren't going to adhere to them next time. That might be good and bad. If there is genuinely a virus which comes along which is more lethal than COVID-19 was ever going to be for the vast majority of healthy people, then we are going to be in trouble, because the trust will not be there.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think Boris Johnson and those around him were knowingly breaking the rules, sitting there having a good laugh about it.
No.
The mistake I think they made was, given the huge sacrifices, you know, it must have been a bit of a bubble in itself, a work bubble of what they were doing in there.
I think Westminster is always a bubble anyway, isn't it?
But especially when people aren't allowed on the street, it probably became increasingly insular. The mistake I think they made is, the cock-up is the fact that this level of scrutiny to what was going on in Downing Street was always going to come.
Well, was it?
Well, I think it was, because people were ultimately always going to be looking that those who are setting the rules were following them to the letter, given the sacrifices they make. And that's the mistake. I don't think this is some big conspiracy of they thought they're taking the mick out of the public. I just think they didn't think enough about the level of analysis of what exactly was going on in Downing Street was going to come.
Well, look, you've been getting in touch. Thanks, guys. You've been getting in touch on the socials. Jeff on Twitter has said the opposition are an unmitigated joke. I used to vote Labour when they were a real People's Party. Now they are really a Liberal Green Party in disguise. I'd not vote for them even if my life depended on it. And Nev on Twitter has said Boris is a pathological serial liar and lawbreaker. In fact, it was quite a moment today. Sir Keir Starmer accused him of being dishonest in the House of Commons, which got got his knuckles wrapped by Sir Lindsay Hoyle, because you're not really supposed to do that. Glenn has said, I agree with Boris. I don't think it would have occurred to me or you or anyone else that returning to a room for 10 minutes to talk to people you've been working with all day, accepting birthday wishes and a slice of cake broke COVID rules. Of course, the police concluded that it did, which is why he got the fixed penalty notice. So, and Anonymous on Twitter, I still support Boris Johnson. I think the left are wetting the bed and pushing a minor point. He apologised and people should have a second chance. I just think we need to remember what normal, real people were dealing with at that time. We should be furious that they weren't either frightened or they didn't feel that the laws applied to them.
Well, you know, the local elections are coming up on May the 5th, and at the Together Declaration, we're encouraging everyone to have their voices, to go out and ask candidates a few key questions. One is about lockdowns, whether they should have happened and whether they would support them again, but also around things like free speech. The online safety bill was also in Parliament today, and also about making sure I have our voices heard. A lot of people are politically homeless now. We hear that from the responses.
Absolutely.
And I really think what's important now is that if people are upset about what's happened, that they take a step forward to make sure the public are more engaged. And that's something the Together Declaration is really passionate about. But we want to actually make sure that everyone gets to hear our voices, and that we're not going to be treated with contempt and disdain anymore. We're not just going to get sidelined and be given these strap lines. We want full parliamentary scrutiny. We want an open, honest, transparent debate with the public, not nudge, win hearts and minds. And why is it, by the way, that censorship's become so big? If it's the case that you're right about your ideas, the antiseptic of light will demonstrate that and reason will come out. And we really have an opportunity, I think, May the 5th as well, to demonstrate that and to get people engaged. And, you know, the main parties, let's be honest, I mean, quite frankly, Keir Starmer is in a rage. He would perhaps have us still locked down now. Many are saying, you know, people like Matthew Taylor, NHS Confederation, we should all be potentially wearing masks again and not socially mixing. It's as though somehow you don't sort the resource question out, but you then suffocate the population. It's utterly unacceptable. And I really think that, you know, viewers and others that are annoyed about this, they can convey their anger in a constructive way to say we need much better. Everyone's got to do better. I agree.
And a year, you know, last 2 years we've really had to question what democracy is with the local elections coming up. I hope we have a really great turnout. Anyway, right, coming up after the break, actress Miriam Margolyes has defended J.K. Rowling for the comments she made defending the identity of biological women within the transgender debate. And there's also been an American golfer, a trans golfer, who has waded in on the row. We want to hear what you think, and you can come back after this break to hear what we think.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
you're watching Dewbs Co with me, Bev Turner, standing in for Michelle today. Now, with me until 7, my panel, former Brexit MEP, now political commentator and YouTuber Michael Heaver, political consultant Emma Burnell, and co-founder of the Together Declaration, Alan Miller. What's been a YouTuber involved, Michael?
YouTubing, obviously.
How does that work? Well, tell our viewers what that means, because you see, my mum will be watching this, she'll go, I don't know what that means, Bev. What's a YouTuber?
Well, the amazing thing with technology now is that people can start their own YouTube channels. I've done it, Michael Heaver on YouTube, obviously, and, you know, you can get different stories and things out there that aren't getting covered as much elsewhere. I do a lot of stuff on the Eurosceptic rises across Europe and things like that, and it's, you know, I think it's really empowering. With technology, you're seeing it in sport, for people to go out there and actually be able to start their own channels and have their voices heard. So it's an exciting time.
I don't know why I gave you a plug for your own YouTube channel.
I appreciate that.
GBNews has got one as well. You can watch us on GBNews. But anyway, there you go, Mum. That's what a YouTuber is. All right, another day, another transgender news story. Miriam Margolyes, brilliant actress. She plays a key role in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter movies, of course. She's defended the writer's controversial position on transgender issues. Now, I say controversial when all J.K. Rowling has ever really said is that biological sex exists and erasing or ignoring women's life experiences is a dangerous path to go down. Also today, there's a professional Australian golfer, Mayan Bagger, who has transitioned from being female to being female in 1995, has said that only biological women should be allowed to compete in professional sports. But she's one of the very few who've spoken out. The cast of Harry Potter lined up to publicly criticise J.K. Rowling when she said that women should not be called people who menstruate. Emma, in a sort of cliche way, I'm going to come to the woman first in this way.
How do you know?
Are you are you a person who menstruates, or are you a woman?
Can I say that I am not only a person who menstruates, but I'm a person who menstruates who's also going through the frickin' menopause. So if you want to talk to me about biological reality, I'm your, well, I wouldn't say gal.
Well, J.K. Rowling would say that is the point, OK? So that a woman's experience from birth till death is very different for all sorts of biological reasons than somebody who transitions to being a woman. But there's a lot of silencing around this debate, isn't there?
There is, and it's been really, really unhelpful. And the people I would say that it's most unhelpful to, actually, is trans people, because we could have had a really nuanced, interesting, important debate about where the boundaries lie, and we all actually have 99% of common ground where we go, you know what, live and let live. It's very important that people should live the life that makes them feel happiest and most comfortable, as long as that doesn't then bump up against the rights of others. That is where almost everybody sits.
Absolutely.
The problem is a few very, very loud people started screaming, don't say anything like that, because actually that denies the reality of trans people. That then created a vast, vicious and vile, hurtful debate around the rights of particularly vulnerable women and the more vulnerable trans community who got caught in the middle of this. And it's come up through celebrities speaking out like J.K. Rowling. And again, I mean, I read her essay. There was nothing in there that was transphobic. There's nothing in there that was hateful. It was just talking about the vast majority of lived experience of women.
But you know what? It really is amazing. I was personally deplatformed about 5 years ago. Before, you know, time's gone a bit funny, hasn't it, with lockdowns? We don't know what year it is anymore, but it was about 4 years ago, I think, and I was due to speak at a legal firm on International Women's Day to talk about the challenges of working mothers, and I worked with pregnant women at the time, women, not pregnant people, pregnant women, and I was going to talk at these legal firms about the challenges facing women in the 21st century. And 24 hours before I was due to go onto this panel, I was cancelled because I had liked a tweet of an article that had been in a national newspaper which was arguing for exactly this. So I got a call from the legal firm to say, we really like you, Bev, but we've got one transgender person in the office who's made a fuss and said you're not the appropriate person to speak. On International Women's Day, I was silenced by somebody who had, I presume, had transitioned to be a woman. I don't know. I don't know if they transitioned to be a man or transitioned to be a woman, but they didn't like what I had to say. And that's left a very bad taste in my mouth, because much better that they'd called me up and said, come along to the office. We've got someone would really love to meet you and have a coffee and tell you why that maybe you don't have the right position. Because, Alan, if the last 2 years have taught us anything, it's that conversation and debate and honest chat is what we need to remain free, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I really agree with what Emma was saying, and I think that it's a travesty now that people are not able to have a discussion without some people, maybe it's just a few, pointing and saying you're evil. And you're not a fellow citizen, that we have similar aspirations, we all have wants, human wants, forget anything else, that are universal, and we can discuss and we can disagree and you can aim to win hearts and minds. But there's a very pernicious thing that's going on, and it's not just in this debate, but it particularly striking within it, which is that the idea that if you offend someone, that you're not allowed to speak and actually you'll be taken down. And we've seen that with big tech and social media and the online safety bill that's being discussed now, and it will carry on going through ping-pong, Parliament, is one of those things that is lawful but harmful. And who decides this whole idea that if you say something, your whole career could be jeopardised, your life, everything about what you do? And I really think that we need to... we have some... Thomas Paine talked about common sense, but we have to have a re-injection of common sense and honesty. Most people in Britain are decent, they believe in fair game, and I think they're very, very open-minded about what people choose to do. But there's a difference then about imposing the idea of what you can and cannot say and trying to deplatform. It's dishonest, and it means you haven't got the arguments to convince people.
What does this, Michael, what does this sort of, this ethos, this kind of mood in the air of not being able to speak about something in case somebody doesn't like you, ultimately, that's what it is, isn't it? That person might not like me if I say something that they find offensive. I don't really care whether people like me or not. That's why I like working here, because we're allowed to have these really frank, in-depth debates, which is so refreshing. What does it do politically, do you think, to a country?
Well, it's stifling,
you know
isn't
what I mean?
it?
It is.
It's stifling. And I think, you know, this is intolerance dressed up as niceness. And I actually got to say on GBNews, you know, hearing some fantastic input on this, we probably disagree on a lot of different things. But the way that you have this debate is very important. 2 points I just want to make on this. One of the most worrying developments, I think, in this country as a democracy is this rise that we've seen on university campuses of young people campaigning and trying to stop events of people speaking because they don't agree with what they say. And on virtually every occasion, the universities buckle and allow mobs to stop people hearing something they may disagree with. And who knows, if they go along, they may actually agree with more than they disagree with. And just the second thing on J.K. Rowling, the abuse that people like her are now getting online on Twitter is disgusting. And I want to, you know, we need to think very seriously as a society across the world, really, about the psychology of grown men, grown women signing up anonymous accounts online and abusing people they've never met in a way that they would never dare do face-to-face. That's really one. If you look at some of the tweets of people, whether it be J.K. Rowling or politicians in this country, the abuse, the name-calling that people are now facing, as I say, from grown adults who hide behind anonymous troll accounts and make these sorts of comments. The psychology of that fascinates me.
But you see, I'm really interested in the psychology of the people who are upset by that. Because in a way, you've got to, if you're in the public eye, you're on social media, you know it comes with the territory.
I think it's unhealthy. If you see some of these people, they're sending hundreds of tweets a day, you know, a variety of people. I seriously worry for their mental health. If they're sitting at 11 o'clock, probably after they put their kids to bed, and they're sitting abusing people online.
Oh,
I think that isn't mentally
but
well.
I don't worry about their mental health because they're being really unkind. So
but people are working themselves up into a stupor, that's what I'm saying, you know.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And we keep going that way, it builds up a level of intolerance.
Yes.
And the idea that we can abuse people online just because we can hide behind anonymous accounts.
But just to give you an idea, I mean, they weren't even anonymous, but when J.K. Rowling had spoken out, or not spoken out, but when she'd said women are women, not people who menstruate, she was worried about, it's a very old-fashioned thing, it's a Latin phrase. I don't know how good your Latin is, guys. Totum mulier in utero, I believe. I'm dragging that from my university days, which was basically meant women are nothing but a womb. Which
was a spell from Harry Potter.
Yeah, J.K. Rowling should sneak that in, shouldn't she? But the idea was it was a literary thing. You know, women are nothing but a womb. It was a Latin phrase. We've come on quite a long way, but since those to consider we're not. And actually now to call women again people who menstruate, for me it feels like we're sort of going slightly back to that very reductive definition. But Daniel Radcliffe has said transgender women are women. Any statement to the contrary erases the identity and dignity of transgender people. Harry Potter himself Rupert Grint, who plays Ron Weasley, he said, sorry, it's the other way around. I always get his wrong. Ron Weasley's
right.
the character. I was right, wasn't I? I firmly stand with the trans community, he said, and echo the sentiments expressed by many of my peers. They kind of ganged up on her.
That's gratitude for you, isn't it?
Yeah, so, I mean, I really think that it also, what we've faced with at the moment, and this is from people in institutions, it's from government and from, you know, a range of areas, is the idea that the public can't be trusted with a debate, that they're mad, bad and dangerous, that if you have a discussion, they're all ready to spring into being terrible monsters that are going to be really reactionary and do terrible things. And actually, look at what happens. When we were faced at the start with something we didn't know, 1 million people volunteered. Look at what people are doing, opening their homes to people, refugees. Look at what people do. For the large part, for a massively, massively huge proportion, people are decent, they're open to listen. And I think that, you know, this is why the online safety bill is really important, but generally the attacks on free speech, we need to really encourage everyone to say, believe in people, win hearts and minds. The demos, citizens, they have an aptitude and they have a capability to understand, make decisions. And actually, what you'll do if you don't do that and you carry on cancelling is you don't change ideas. You actually entrench, some of those ideas. And you drive them away, and you drive people... And actually, I think that actually encourages and increases a kind of more hatred and resentment, and we've got to be much more open together.
Yeah. OK, Karen has got in touch on Twitter. She says, I stand with J.K. Rowling, and I think a lot of people do. It just took a few people in the public eye, actually, to come out and support her, and then it did feel like others can as well. OK, right, we are going to be going to a quick break now. Don't forget, get in touch on Twitter. But after 2 years of working from home, you think people would be desperate to get back to the office. Well, that's not the case. 9 out of 10 of you, lazy things, don't want to go back to the office. We're going to discuss that after the break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs Co.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's 2 questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Dewbs Co with me, Bev Turner, this evening standing in for Michelle. Now with me until 7, my panel, former Brexit MEP and political commentator Michael Heaver, political consultant Emma Burnell, and co-founder of the Together Declaration and one of the hardest working men throughout the pandemic and lockdowns, Alan Miller. I think you're going to be Sir Alan Miller one day. You know that. I keep thinking that. You've done so much good, Alan.
Thank you.
Right, now, as we all know, the pandemic changed much about the way we live our lives, including the way we work. According to research by the Universities of Cardiff and Southampton, 9 in 10 workers who worked from home during lockdown say they would like to continue to do so. This comes as the Welsh Government announced it will continue advising people to work from home. Meanwhile, Jacob Rees-Mogg has called for all civil servants to go back to the office. Is it time to accept this is a hybrid way of working? Michael, I'm going to come to you because we've got a Twitter poll. I'm going to bring you the results of that in just a moment. I really worry about humanity if everybody is sat in their house on a screen like this. Don't talk to another person. Don't get flirting over the water cooler. What does that do to us? What does that do to us, Michael?
Well, no, look, human contact is absolutely essential. But one of the things I was raising right at the start when lockdown first happened was, from a business point of view, if you're running a business, what is the incentive, for instance, to dish out for a big London office that costs you a lot of money if you can take a slight hit on productivity? And, you know, I've got friends, for instance, in sales jobs, well, that's all online now. Your bosses can monitor you remotely, how many calls you're making, how your sales are going. And so from a business point of view, I think that was always going to be the case of, do businesses still need to invest in having that space? Apart from, apart from the question of whether it's mentally good for you. In terms of the civil service, I mean, I find it absolutely bonkers, and well done, Jacob Rees-Mogg is right on this. How can it be the case, they've had these figures released, that the Department for International Trade's at 73% capacity, but the Department for Education's at 25%? What is that disparity all about? How can that possibly be justified?
Well, if you've tried to do anything with the DVLA recently, you'll know that no one's picking up the phone. They're not doing anything. And in fact, the DVLA were in the paper for saying just that, weren't they? That the people working for the DVLA have just not been doing their job.
Yeah, so several aspects of this. The taxpayer-funded side of it, and obviously the mental side of it in terms of young people going out there, out and about. You know, increasingly we're isolated, some people, through social media, for instance, because it's easier now just to message people, FaceTime them. How much are people going out now and actually going and spending money and having that face-to-face contact? But I certainly think, as I said, from the business point of view and the taxpayer point of view, these are all things that are going to have to be tackled. I mean, the government should be getting, I think, civil servants back into the office. But that business point of view, you know, I've always said it from the start. Are businesses going to go back? Are you going to have the London 100% in terms of the business investment on premises that you had before? I'm not sure, because if you can save that cost, you'll take the hit to productivity.
Well, I had a mate who had 2 offices. He had some sort of digital tech business. And when lockdown happened, he said to his staff, where do you want to work? Do you want to work at home or do you want to work in the office? One of those offices cost him 100 grand a year in rent. The other one cost him 25 grand a year in rent. He's a very successful man. And they all said, no, we want to work from home. And so he has just closed the office that cost him 100 grand a year. That's 100 grand a cost he has saved overnight. And he gave his employees the choice. Is it all bad, Alan? I worry about... I think we are just seeing the start of the ripple effect of what the last 2 years have done.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be huge.
Well, the first point is the Welsh Government, who's had a zero COVID, COVID-only approach that wanted to go longer, faster, harder on it. Like Nicola Sturgeon, as it happens, who gave all these rules but couldn't wear a mask herself and wanted to carry on with all the conditions. We are faced with an enormous challenge now. Cost of living crisis, I think, as a consequence of lockdowns, but also an energy crisis, which is a consequence of many sluggish years, actually since the 70s in Britain. We need a robust approach, almost like the Manhattan Project or the WPA in the States, which says some state bonds and support infrastructure, but lots of private investment. And that also means people being engaged. Now, it is the case that you can have a nuanced way of dealing with that, right? Some people can work in different places remotely, but we need training, we need retraining, we need investment in energy plans, we need proper nuclear, lots of shell, and we need people back in retail and hospitality. They have the people in there right now. We need city and town and regional regeneration plans. And this is an enormous opportunity for Britain to come out and really transform ourselves through, start investment in AI and biotech and IT. We could have all these things. But in order to do that, we're social creatures, right? We need to be brought together. The idea that you maintain well-being, but you have to demonstrate a business need to come... This is all gobbledygook or Orwellian speak. Yeah. We need to be out working together. That might mean sometimes that you choose to do it remotely. And actually, some of the SMEs have office costs. But what's really worrying is that the big financial institutions, the major banks, insurance companies, and a lot of the big office-taking organisations have actually shredded a lot of that cost. Now, you could be innovative about how you replace that and transform it, but we all know, anyone who's worked together, when you work together, we all know the last 2 years, right? Zoom and all that, great if you're in different places, but you really get the magic when people come together.
Yeah, you do. Emma, do you like working from home?
Well, I've worked from home since 2017, to be honest. It wasn't new for me. I have a specific sort of spot on the sofa, the cat sits on the shoulder. For me, I think what's really missing from this debate is a sense of productivity. I mean, for example, we say, business people is great and they can, cut their costs, but civil servants should be going into the office. Why? They're not aliens. They don't have different productivity brains than other people. What we should be asking is, how do we work most productively and best? How do we make sure that we get the best from probably a hybrid system?
Yeah.
Where we get some time where we are talking to each other and some time where we're more focused.
I think most people want that, don't we?
And
So something that working mothers have been
sort of 9 out
begging
of 10
for
they're
decades.
They're not lazy. They're not trying to get out of work. They're trying to work in the way that works for them.
Yeah,
and I
difficult,
think if
though.
we actually flip our view of what work is, work that works for us.
Yeah, let me just go to our Twitter poll then. Thank you, everybody who voted in that. We did ask you, as 9 in 10 employees wish to work remotely amid a cost of living crisis, will the long-term social and economic effects be mainly positive or negative? The result was... I'm waiting for somebody to tell me the result. And we don't have the result. Hang on, someone's gone to find out. Let me carry on talking to you while somebody finds out the result. Michael, I do worry though. You're young. You're on. Are you?
Ish, well, that's very kind of you.
Well, you're youngish. What would your week look like? How would it be different if you were always sat at home in your spare room on the computer?
Well, I think, look, just going back to, I wanted to raise this point in terms of my friends that I've spoken to again through working. The reason that they're keen not to go back is because they've actually saved money financially.
Yeah.
So you've got to remember, commuting in, if you were commuting five times a week,
yeah.
They've effectively their pay rise.
I have got our results of our Twitter poll by the magic of technology. A positive effect on society, only 24% of you thought that. 76% of you thought overwhelmingly the effects of working from home would be negative on our socio-economic, our psychosocial. Anyway, I find it a fascinating topic, and we'll no doubt be talking about it for years to come on our own, in bedrooms, down our screens. OK, 5-time Olympic champion cyclist and Tour de France winner Bradley Wiggins has revealed that he was sexually groomed by a cycling coach when he was just 13 years old. He's added that the alleged abuse impacted him as an adult, but he buried it at the time because he had no one to turn to talk to. So this happened 18 years ago, and it made me wonder whether these days are gone, because I don't know about you, there's Bradley on the front of Men's Health magazine. You've got to remember, he was such a massive star in 2012 when he won his Olympic gold medals and he won the Tour de France the same year. What a story. He's had a bit of a turbulent journey since. He's got divorced. He seems much happier now. I've seen him interviewed a few times and he seems like a different man largely. But this for me raises the issue, Alan, about why has it taken so long to talk about this? And I like to think that now, surely, children could come forward. Could they or not? Am I being a bit naive?
Well, as it happens, I think in society, we not only talk about it a lot, but actually, perhaps we're slightly over-obsessed about it. And whilst it's terrible, if anyone goes through a situation, you have to be courageous to talk about it. I happen to think that it's a bit like one of those universals. If we can imagine pre-lockdown society, it's one of the few things that everyone agrees on, how terrible, rightly, that something like this happens. But it's almost like we have this notion that all adults are potentially risky to children. I mean, a couple of examples. I remember bringing up my kid and being in the playground, and a kid fell over and he was crying. And there wasn't, and he went like that, and I second-guessed myself to give him a hug or whatever because I thought, who's looking around?
Yeah.
And there's lots of examples where a truck driver in the States driving along didn't stop to help a distressed girl because when the police said, why didn't you do that? He said, I didn't want to be accused of doing something. So I think that these are really serious issues. They absolutely have to be addressed. I wonder how much they've actually increased as opposed to the idea that it's everywhere. And we have a bit of a prism, I think, that this kind of like all of us are terrible. And actually, I think, we have to be really great at therapy and dealing with people that have gone through this. It takes courage to, you know, people have many ways of dealing with it. Some of it's to talk openly and publicly, some of it's to deal with it privately, and we should respect all those.
Emma, you're shaking your head a little bit there. It's a bit...
Yeah, I want to make something really, really, really clear because it's very, very important. Safeguarding is not about assuming that everybody is a bad guy. It's about not knowing who the bad guys are and making sure that there are support systems in place so that when the bad guy, who is really good at hiding in plain sight, that's what bad guys do, slips through the net, the child has both the understanding that what's happening to them is wrong and the understanding that they need and should be able to tell another adult that what has happened to them. And I think it's really important that we don't go from thinking that these safeguarding rules assume that you're a bad guy rather than assume that a child has to have that safety. And I just cannot stress enough how important that is, particularly as we've been talking, you know, throughout the show on different issues about different ways that we judge each other and different permissive ways that we have society. I think a permissive society is really important, but a permissive society still has boundaries and rules, and those rules are there to protect children against bad guys, and they do have to assume that the child must be free from risk, and that means none of us should be assuming that we're not.
Do you think we're living in a different time now, though, Michael?
I think specifically on men, you know, when you look at men specifically, we know that suicide rates, for instance, are far higher.
The biggest killer of men under 45.
Exactly. And I do think, you know, there are a number of good campaigns actually out there that are encouraging men to come forward. But just on that more broadly, one of the things I find quite horrible at the moment is the only time we ever seem to hear the word masculinity in mainstream media is when the word toxic goes before it. And that's really negative, I think, about how some boys growing up and men think about what being a man is. Should they be ashamed? You know, should they feel a certain way? We need to be a lot more positive. Obviously, celebrate women, absolutely, I'm a big fan. But also be positive about masculinity.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And as somebody that would call that would call myself a feminist, and I am, but I worry about my son. I worry about my teenage son and what it is to be a man.
Well, I don't hear feminists nowadays saying very positive things generally about men anymore, sadly.
I like men.
Well, we do.
We do here.
We love all men, all women, and we talk about the ones in between rather a lot. OK, that is it for tonight's show. Thank you to my panel, Michael Heaver, Emma Burnell and Alan Miller. If you missed any of tonight's show, you can catch up on the GB News app, and also the Dewbs Co podcast, of course, is available on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Nigel Farage is coming up at the top of the hour. I will hopefully see you again soon.
Hello again, I'm Stephen Keats and I've got your latest Met Office forecast for you. Showers from Tuesday generally fading away with some fog for parts of Northern Ireland, and it's quite a chilly night across the northern half of the UK. So here's the showers across parts of South Wales, the West Country, central southern England, pulling away to the southwest, tending to fizzle out over the next few hours. Some fog patches developing across Northern Ireland with light winds given the showers from earlier today. And for northern Scotland, it's a fairly clear night here. And here's where we'll see the lowest temperatures, a touch of frost, certainly in some sheltered glens, not quite so cold further south. Now, chilly start in Scotland underneath this ridge of high pressure extending down from Scandinavia. These weather fronts out in the Atlantic, not really making too much in the way of progress eastwards into the UK during Wednesday. So a bright start across Scotland, some sunshine to come here. The fog across Northern Ireland soon lifting through Wednesday morning. And elsewhere, where we've got various areas of cloud, these will tend to break up and tend to disperse as the day goes on. Elsewhere, where we start off sunny, a little bit of fair weather cloud developing. Perhaps the cloud thick enough by the Wednesday afternoon for a few showers across parts of Wales, western and southwest England. For most places, though, it will be a warmer day than what we saw during Tuesday. Temperatures close to 20 degrees in the south, cooler, though, along those North Sea coasts. And then a fine evening to come for Wednesday night into Thursday, with, again, lots of clear weather around for many places. Some areas of cloud drifting into the North Sea coast of both England and Scotland. It could be quite misty and murky, particularly around the coast of eastern Scotland by the time we get to first thing Thursday. Again, cold enough for a touch of frost in some rural areas in the north, but for most towns and cities, there's temperatures holding up between around 4 and 8 Celsius. And then for Thursday, well, it's slow changes really, not too much different compared to what we'll see on Wednesday. Perhaps a bit more cloud in certain parts of the country, particularly central and eastern areas, and it could be quite grey and misty around some coasts of eastern Scotland and northeast England. Elsewhere, though, west is generally best for sunshine. That's where we'll see the highest temperatures too. So a bit of a mixed bag for sunshine amounts on Thursday, more cloud generally for Friday and Saturday, and those temperatures just coming down a touch.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you,